Welcome to Offwatch, our weekly interview series. This week it's the turn of Simeon Tienpont, skipper in the last edition with Team AkzoNobel. And as anyone who was following the last edition will remember, AkzoNobel got off to a shaky start in Alicante. And we spoke about that and what was happening from his point of view as skipper on the team. Also, we discuss his experience with the Volvo 70s and his America's Cup victories. If you enjoy this interview, you can leave us a like, subscribe to our channel for more, and in the comments below, let us know who you want us to talk to next time. Enjoy. Dutchman Simeon Tienpont has achieved a lot in the last decade. Since racing the Finn class to sharpen his skills, it was multi-hulls that gave him his first big win, and it doesn't come much bigger than the 2010 America's Cup on board a 34-metre trimaran with Team Oracle USA. And he won again in 2013 just for good measure. He's competed in the ocean race 3 times, most notably as skipper in the last edition for Team AkzoNobel, finishing in 4th place and coming away with a new outright 24-hour distance record of 601.8 nautical miles. Simeon, thank you very much for talking to me today. I think that's fair that most people will know you from the last edition as skipper from Team AkzoNobel, but I think it's worth pointing out that in one way or another, you've been involved with the race for almost half your life. It was 2005-06 with ABN AMRO 2 when you first got involved, and you were just 23 years of age. I wonder if somebody had said to you, you know, in a couple of editions' time, you might come back and you'll be a skipper. Would you have believed them at that age?
Yeah, I only realize now how old I'm getting. No, but yeah, maybe I'm, it's funny when you put it this way. But I think the race itself, the first time I got in touch with it was probably at home when my father used to bring me probably in already the first race in the 80s, somewhere at the end of the 80s, to his office and sit behind the fax machine on a Sunday, calling in a number, and then printing out all these different dotted lines. And then the whole week in class, I could check out which boat was ahead. And probably that was the first time when the race really starting to get into my life. And then I think I was 8 years old the first time or maybe a little bit older, but I came to Southampton for the start of the Whitbread Around the World race when the Volvo 60s appeared for the first time. And my big hero at the time, Dennis Connors, was participating with Winston. So yeah, it's definitely a race that is a bit of an obsession, and I can't let it go from when I was a child till now.
But that first one then, I mean, that first one with ABN AMRO 2, I mean, at 23 years of age, that seems quite young, but it was quite a young team, wasn't it? I mean, you guys were all quite kind of, experienced, but younger in age.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity, and I think it was a great, looking now, it was a great story from the main sponsor, ABN AMRO, as well. They had a team an international team that needed to win their flagship, and of course, as a sponsor, they wanted to see that they're supporting the youth as well. So that whole sort of first time to search for talent around the world, and the crew had to be under 30. It was a real opportunity for many of us. And I think what they did very well is that also they were able to combine a great skill set of young people. And I think that was also a little bit my luck, that not only big Olympic sailors, but also some more experienced match racers, and also a few guys with more technical background to keep the whole thing together, because that was at that stage with those new Volvo 70s a really big challenge, and how to sail these boats. And I think that made a pretty cool team. And I think looking back now, still, I'm always getting amazed how young people are getting underestimated. and maybe as well because I noticed that everywhere, old people don't want to give their power away at the moment. Look at the elections in the US. I mean, like generations go on and on and on, and they don't want to let go. And somehow it underestimates what young people are capable of. And I think even in that race, you couldn't believe the comments of the experienced guys of how dangerous it was going to be, and this was completely foolish. And I think we sailed an unbelievable race, and we showed great seamanship in not only in the Southern Ocean, but also in difficult in the moments when it was very difficult, when we lost one of our crew members. Something that, as a young team, I think still looking back to it now, is very special.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, and obviously Hans Horrevoets is the loss of him is still being felt. The interesting one for me when I was reading up about your backstory was that being such a young team, Hans Horrevoets being the oldest. I correct me if I've got this right, but I think he was the oldest person on board the boat in 32, I think he was. And of course, the rookie trophy has now been, given his name and all the rest of it. I'm wondering, for somebody who knew him, who sailed with him, is it nice to see, like you say, that legacy being there to entice the young to come back in?
Yeah. No, I mean, the race, and I think everyone you talk to, like the international sailing world is still a pretty small community if you compare it to other big sports, if it's soccer or rugby, and I think then even in a niche sport, the Volvo Ocean Race is a very nice niche in ocean racing, and that gives us some kind of family bond, and also the opportunity that people that made a name in that race or did something special or put themselves forward, and I think that's certainly the case with Hans. He was a person that he only joined our team last moment because we needed a little bit of that experience, but he was one of the guys that was really pushing to get to for the young and the new generation to do it, and he was still pretty young. And and it's nice that that's still being recognized because, of course, accidents happen everywhere in life, and unfortunately in that race as well on our team. But he made a name for himself of the character he was, of the sailor he was, of the prestations he did, and that's pretty cool still to see that. In a nice the ocean race family, he's still being remembered, and everyone who calls his name always gets a smile on his face, and that's for me very funny because he was a very happy guy.
And of course, a Dutchman as well. You've done, like I said in the introduction, you've done a lot. I mean, it has been quite an action-packed decade. When you first get on board that boat at 23, and you've got some people to look up to, maybe on your boat, but certainly on other boats as well. How much were you playing the long game? How much were you thinking, this is my first ocean race, I'm going to learn so much because I'm going to come back and I'm going to come back and I'm going to come back? Or was it just a case of, let's just ride this roller coaster one time and we'll enjoy it?
Yeah, for me personal, I had a childhood dream from very young that I wanted to race around the world. Back in the day it was called the Whitbread, and then later on the Volvo Ocean Race, and I sailed around in my Optimist with the stickers of, I think, still the 93, 94 race, and it was certainly a dream, but it wasn't in my mind to be a professional sailor or to become that as a job, and that sort of happened. And I had a huge opportunity, and of course I sailed a lot of offshore miles. And at that stage, I was in the right moment at the right place and also with the right background. I did a lot of offshore sailing because I loved that. That's where my passion was when I was young, but also a little bit of a technical background because of my studies. It sort of fitted in very well with the needs of the crew on board. These boats were getting more and more demanding from a crew perspective, where you had to deliver more horsepower into it, and that was very good for me with my 100 kg. And I was back in when I was 20, I was pretty athletic, and but also of the wisdom or the feeling that you need to have how to and when to put these horsepowers and what is possible not to break things. And I think that was sort of my breakthrough in the race. And once you sail 50,000 miles around the world racing, if you weren't a good sailor already, you will become one. And but I actually after the 05, 06 race, I had one big frustration, and that was that we didn't win, or at least hit the podium. And then I thought, God damn it, I need to do this again. But I refused a contract in the America's Cup at that time, and I just came back to Rotterdam, and I kept studying. And because I didn't saw it for myself to become a professional sailor till the moment I was really being asked in the Cup in 2007 as an engineer, but also the combination of sailor and engineer, and that actually was a very nice job to have for many years.
It's interesting you mentioned that as a sailor and an engineer, because I've come across this a couple of times. How important is it nowadays, with all the technology that's going on, certainly with the America's Cup, but also with the ocean race, not least with the Imoca 60s, how important is it as a sailor to be able to talk that technological conversation and be able to describe what you're feeling in a technological way? I imagine that it's becoming quite useful.
Yeah. One thing pops me up of if I can still interrupt you.
Yeah,
one
please.
thing that you asked me personally of if I would ever become a sailor, and it crosses my mind when I was 22 and walking over the dock at the time in Vigo. What was very funny and what was funny coming back now doing the race as a skipper, I remember that I was really looking up against Torben Grill. And also against, of course, guys like Paul Kayart. We were like 21, 22. And I remember, crossing these guys over the dock. And maybe I sailed against them once against the regatta. But, guys like Paul Kayart, they don't see me standing, And back then, maybe still not, I don't know. But he was too busy with his team and with everything. But I remember Torben Grill coming to the dock, crossing the dock first time, and they arrived at Brazil 1, and he stopped and he said, "Hey, Simeon, I'm Torben." And I'm like, "Oh my God, this guy knows my name. This is pretty incredible, And of course, probably went through the booklet or he checked out the team, and he knew, and he sort of knew the faces and the names. But that for me was a very big welcome into this race and some of the characters that are in that race. And but of course, it was also very funny to see that almost 12 years later, I guess, or 11 years later, he was there on the dock again, but then as a father, and telling me, "You're gonna better take care of my daughter, and you know what you're doing," because and that was for me a moment that I thought that's definitely never crossed my mind when I was 22 and I meet him for the first time in Vigo on the dock. And that's actually very funny for me, how life can go and how you sort of grow into the sport as well.
And a big honor.
Second question. I'm sorry for that.
No.
Second question. Yeah, and I think I can give a short answer to that of how important. Yeah, I think the engineering aspect and understanding that. The engineering aspect of understanding that, how important it is as a sailor nowadays. There's a lot of young guys and girls that are asking me, how do I get an entry in the professional sailing sport? And and they give up everything, and I think it's very important. I always give them the advice is follow your study, whatever you're doing, if it's nutrition or if it's engineering or whatever it is, because sailing is a very wide sport and you need a lot of different talents to get a team together. It's, the race is just the final exam, but to bring all these aspects together, you need a lot of different talents. And as a sailor and as a crew that has to take that final exam, you need to have a broad range of understanding of those talents, but also to give an input. And I think that was always what I found very fun, and from an engineering point of view, and you can see that very clearly as well. I think in car racing in the Formula One, as a driver or as a sailing crew, if you can't sort of translate your intuition and feeling into the language of the engineers, you're not innovating, because these guys can only do that much behind the computer or from their desk, but they don't have that feel, they don't have that intuition, they haven't sailed hundreds, thousands and thousands of miles, but still you want them to make a better and faster and stronger and more reliable vessel. And that's, I think, the very cool thing, or what I found so addicting in this sport, is that the technical aspect of it is very important in your end result. And as a crew, if you can have the talent to sort of continuously translate your intuition into the language of the engineer, you're making big steps.
Let's talk about the last edition then. Let's talk about some of the big steps that you made. So let's start at the beginning. You were one of the first teams to announce, and then you made the decision to take some of that time that you had and build a new boat, get a fresh VO65, never been sailed before. And that was, you had some people saying, well, this is brilliant. You're going to have a brand new boat. It doesn't have any of the stresses and strains of going around the world. And other people saying, well, just take one of the old ones and recondition it. I know that you did the edition before with Team Vestas Wind. You did it with them, and I think you joined them in Lisbon. I'm wondering whether seeing the boat sort of rebuilt from what it took, I mean, do you look at that decision now and do you think that was the right thing? We had a boat that was fast, or do you think actually, the 65s they would have been okay? What do you look back and think?
To be really honest, I think from the outside world, it was always being put like, he wants a new boat, and a new boat is better to win, and maybe he likes building boats. But to be really honest, that decision was more driven by the logistics, time, and availability, and also price. I mean, at that stage, I think, of course, there were already teams that didn't announce themselves, but they claimed the boat and they knew that they were going to do it, but they just didn't announce themselves yet. And at the time, I think it was in the sort of autumn 2016, I guess. I had I think Full Ocean Race at the time really wanted to have 8 boats being built, and that was for me very attractive from a price view as well, because at the end of the day, it wasn't sort of that much more investment to get a new boat going than to buy an old one and then do the whole refit and become into a schedule of refits where you have a lot of downtime where you can't sail. So if you have the opportunity as a new team to go for a new boat that is also going to be on the water in the beginning of May, or you're going to have a second-hand boat that you sort of, can train with through the autumn and winter, but then you lose it as well. And sort of in the investment, it doesn't matter. Yeah, for us, the best choice is to take the old Vestas boat, use that as a training platform, and then let the new boat being built. Don't worry about refits or about guys that have pushed that boat 50,000 miles before around the planet and I wasn't there, so there are no hidden surprises. So it basically didn't really matter that much in the end. But as a new team for us, we had a great opportunity and great run that we could sail with that Vestas boat. And I think now looking back after in the race, for sure that also the new boat had had some advantages. We were still the lightest boat, we had the most corrector weights in the boat. Of course, they were all being the same, but the end result, it was very nice. I think Persico builded the boat, made a very nice job. The finish was just great, which gave us not a lot of saved a lot of maintenance energy, which was good, and all the systems were new, and so it was. In the end, you sort of hoping to save that time on the shore during the race. And but also, I think our boat was very stiff and reliable. And but of course, I mean, at this stage, it doesn't really matter. They all been pushed hard and put away wet. So it wasn't enough advantage, let's say, to become the winner or not. It all ended up still how you sailed it and how good you could trim and how fast you were pushing it.
Sure. I mean, we'll come to it in a minute, but you guys did push pretty hard. I mean, like I said in the beginning, you've got the 24-hour record, but also 6 podiums, I think you guys finished up with, which I think Dongfeng Race Team also got 6, walking away with the trophy. They got 6 as well.
I'm not 100% sure, but I think we got sort of, if you look at the podium results, I think we had the same as Dongfeng. And
yeah, I think so.
Sort of the same amount of first place, the second and third. And, that's where the frustration is and painful, and for sure it hits me once a week when I'm letting out the dog and doing my dog walk in the night. But it's like, what if I would have be more conservative in that Southern Ocean from Cape Town to Melbourne, because that's where we sort of lost it, with that whole mast breakage. That sort of happened to Dongfeng as well in the race before, in the 14-15 race, when they broke their mast in the Southern Ocean, and they ended up 4th as well, while they had like sort of the best standings on paper in podium positions. So it was a tough one, but that's how the race is. And it was very fierce racing between some really, really good competitors. And I think, even for me, for sure, Dongfeng and Mafre were the 2 dominant players during that race, and one of them was going to take it, and Dongfeng did it, And I think for us, of course, we had our times that we were dominant and we had the potential, but we sometimes one mistake can hurt you big time for the rest of the race.
I want to ask you about that Southern Ocean jibe, but before I do that, we also need to go back to Alicante, and we need to go back to the start, because you talk about some things that happen that you kind of go, this is not what we wanted, and now the sort of momentum has maybe been sort of damaged a little bit. I think for a lot of people who follow the race, they look at the skipper and they think that's the head of the team. They're the person with all the control. They're the person who says jump, and everybody jumps. Now, with Team AkzoNobel, obviously there was, right at the 0 hour, this disagreement with yourself and with the management company. I'm sure that there's a lot of things there that's not fun to remember and talk about, but just to sort of help everybody understand why these things can happen, just if you can, explain to me, as skipper, what were you in control of, and then what was everybody else in control of, and where did the friction come from?
I think what's interesting, what I always keep telling to everyone as well, in these big campaigns, of course, you have control to a certain point of what happens, the team, the people you take on, how you're running it. But there's always a huge factor that you can't control when you start these teams, and that is sort of still the main stakeholder you're going to do this adventure with. And I find that always very intriguing, because in the American campaigns I did, in the ABN AMRO, in the Dutch campaign, sort of the main sponsor, the main stakeholder, if you want it or not, you're becoming part of their culture. You're becoming part of their corporate a lot of times, because they're corporate sponsors. You need to breathe their identity. And that campaign, even that you can be all sailors from different nationalities, you're going to breathe their identity. And I think looking back, what was very difficult in that campaign, that there was a very strong decision from the board in 2016 to use the Volvo Ocean Race campaign with Team AkzoNobel for a certain management exercise, but also to show the outside world of who they were, product placement, B2B, and that was something that came from the top, and you are in some ways a strategic tool with that, which is a dream scenario, because in that sense, everything is focused as well on performance, and these guys, they know performance. And so I think we started off really well, and I think we got a lot of things very well organized. Where it became a little bit different is when within the corporate world things change around, and there's a different focus, and not because they want that themselves, but when a company gets influenced by takeovers or different management, other things become more important than maybe this sort of strategic tool. And I think that's sort of what happened with us a little bit in the spring of 2017. And which we ended up as a campaign a little bit in a vacuum. Where do we belong, within the main sponsor? What do I want to do with us? How is this going to end up? And that resulted maybe as well a little bit as a top sport team, where you really want to drive for victory and everything is focused on performance, till maybe sometimes where they say, well, maybe, we can go around the world as well, and we can still make a nice campaign with some less effort and investment. But in the end, like any sometimes disagreement that you have, on the workplace or with other stakeholders, you need to come to a solution. But of course, it wasn't really in my planning, or even as a sporter, that 2 weeks before the race, you sort of need to fight for this and protect the team of our dreams and ambitions and what we have worked for. But I did, and I was very lucky that a very good team around me, not only on the water but also on the shore, that always did the things in the right order and always had everything perfectly organized. So that was a strange 2 weeks before the start, but also sort of a big boost when you do have your stuff together. You can really bite back as well. But you feel a little bit in those moments like David and Goliath. And as a team, we were in the David and Goliath. and as a team, you are in that moment David. And yes, you get everything straightened out, unfortunately through courts. But then you're back in Alicante and you have 2 or 3 days to start a race. And I think what was for me a big boost at that moment is that I had built a team, or the majority of the team, that was still standing behind me and that really wanted to do this together. Because if that wasn't there, then as a skipper or as a leader, you're nowhere. And that made me really motivated to push for it. But I knew the race was changed as well. I couldn't focus anymore 100% on the race, but there was also a relationship to be repaired. And that's also the role, what I learned as a skipper at that moment, is that at the end of the day, we did it together and you straightened things out. But, the goal was as well that when you arrive in The Hague over the finish line, everyone needs to put that race in their prize cabinet. Not only the sailors, but also the sponsors, the stakeholders, the supporters. And I think that is probably the biggest achievement as a team and Team AkzoNobel that we have made. That everyone, and for me as well, I'm looking back, from a business perspective, it was a really big challenge and a really big success. For me as a sporter, I would have spent way more time on the boat and as a sailor and be a little bit less worried about what was happening on shore and trying to fix the relationships. And but it is how it is, and I think I learned a great deal of it, and that's what I told you before. Sometimes it's frustrating because you really want to do it all, and you wanted to win that race, and we had these podium positions, and we were the fastest boat 24 hours, and we knew how to push, and I had unbelievable sailing crew on board, and we had a great team that was really going for each other day and night. And that's, try it another time.
Well, you're absolutely right though about the boat getting its speed back and the team finding your groove again. It did happen. I mean, it was the morning of the start in Alicante that you were having to pull in replacement crew from Sunhunkai Scallywag at the last minute to make sure you had the required amount of people. And I'm sure on that first leg, there was some emails that you must have been sending off from the boat going, right, I need to fill in some places here. When did you feel like we're back? I've got the team again. We've got a good group of people again. We've got that feeling back. When did you relax?
Of course, it was a rush start, nothing that you ever can dream of or think of. I think what was for me very good feeling is that we sailed with 7 guys to Lisbon, and we did unbelievable well.
Yeah.
And the older generation, they didn't support it. So at that time, Joga and Brad, we didn't come to an agreement, and that was on one end you think, wow, guys with so much experience, they've seen it all, but this is not going to go well. The team was not standing behind it to race with these guys. So the core group of young people was there, and it was a huge boost that when you sail so well, that we all looked at each other at some point. I think the day after we came out of Gibraltar and we were in the second place, you're like, we know how to sail. We still got a lot to learn, but we know how to sail. We can do this. We're only 7 guys, and nobody had slept. Because you have to work hard with 10 people crew. Imagine with 7. It was. Physically, it was maybe even the hardest leg, and I couldn't sleep the first 46 hours as well. Everything that happened those 2 weeks before, that will still go at that moment. You're at sea, and that was all going sort of through your mind, and you need to process it. But so we sailed a very good leg, and then it was a very rush stopover in Lisbon to get basically back to a top level team. And really get our stuff together. And everything was there, but still, you're scrambling apart. And then I think finishing in Cape Town, I was actually, reading some newspaper that my grandmother, she saves all the articles. And I saw one of the articles that it said something like, for Team AkzoNobel, it felt like a podium place to become, I think, 5th in Cape Town. And of course, we didn't end up on the podium. But I think as a team, we sort of thought, now we are sort of gelling in. We had very good moments in this leg. We had some bad decision making as a group where there was miscommunication, but I really felt like I can solve this, building on the team again with the right people. And next leg, the hammer goes down. But then when you are asking me what was really the feeling that you could sort of win this race, even from the worst perspective ever, was probably in the leg of Cape Town, Melbourne. Because after we made this sort of fatal mistake of where the mast track broke, that was never allowed to break. I mean, but it did. At that moment, you are thrown back as a team to the ground again, and then at that moment, how you pick up the pieces with each other, and also for me, how the team stayed together, how you sort of focused at that moment, like, well, let's use our time the best going into Melbourne because this leg is gone. Let's prepare ourselves that we only need to win from now on. It's funny enough, when we arrived in Melbourne, I think we felt very, very strong, and that sort of from that moment on, we start sailing podium positions, but also in the fact that we started to understand the boat, we started to understand the strength and limitations of us as a crew again, of who is what was the strength of who, and in what moment, if it's tactical, but also sometimes for, like say, boat handling, steering, when certain conditions. And I think from that moment we really showed great progress, and Hong Kong was the first stopover where I relaxed. Where I really slept a lot. Because Melbourne was for us also, I think, a little bit more than 24 hours, but we had to restart in 48 hours.
Yeah. And but I think we talk a lot about the performance of a team as in, oh, they finished third or they finished second or they were fast. But like you say, actually, the fact that you were able to get your mast track back on the boat, bonding it back on in freezing cold conditions. I mean, the videos of, I can't remember who it was that was up the mast, but a poor crew member up the mast hanging on for grim death as the boat's breaking around. It was an incredible effort to do that. And then we get onto this sort of performance streak where you guys are really sort of, like you say, performing well. It's interesting to hear you say you felt the team kind of coming together at that point. As a skipper, do you ever find a moment in the race when things are going well that you get to say, I'm really glad I chose that person? Did you get a chance to go, that one, to see those individual moments where they shine?
Yeah, I think I had that with all of them through the whole 9 months, and maybe multiple times, and but what for me was very cool as well is that when we started in 2016, and we announced and we started to start sailing with with the Vestas boat, is that we were building up also at that moment the possibilities that we had, but we're building up the team from the bottom up. And normally, and what I want to mean with that is that normally you sort of when you start a team, you pick as a skipper, you pick your let's say, I wouldn't say second rank, but let's say the guys you really trust, that have the experience, the veterans, and then you're going to look at talent, and that's, and you make a strategy based on experience, on what's going to happen. And we did it the other way around because we didn't have the financial possibilities to immediately bring in the hot shots. And but we just needed to start sailing for the sponsor, for the boat, for to get going as a completely new team, because all the other teams that were going to participate did that race before, except for Scallywag, I guess, and Turn the Tide. But so we just got going, and I think the first guys I started with was, of course, Luke, which I know from Luke Malloy from ABN AMRO times, and I asked Nicolai Shested and Brad Ferrand, and Brad came through Nicolai, and Nicolai I sailed with him those last little legs on Vestas Wind.
Mm.
And that was actually a very fun way to start. And because we just went for it, and we sort of started to organize the team from our view, which was maybe a little bit different than when you do it with 20 years of experience. And that core always stayed together. And I think still now, when you look back at the race when we finished, there's always a special bond between that. You were there from the first moment. These guys were there from the first moment, and we made it to the end. And but then, nevertheless, even when Chris came, Chris Nicholson in Portugal, I mean, all these guys had a crucial part later on within the team of how we sailed the boat, how we learned with each other, of how we got organized, etc. The guys on the shore team, of course, the same. The guys I worked with for a long time, even from the Cups. Bryce Ruthenberg and Andy Walker. I mean, that's something that's great about this race, is you're taking on such an adventure and such a challenge, and to do that with guys from the very start, and to sing this through for 3 years or 2.5 years, and to end up happy with each other as well. That's something that marks you and forms you, and also the relationships. And that's pretty cool.
You said at the beginning, when I was talking about how young you were on board ABN AMRO 2, you said you didn't realize how old you become. But you're not that old. I mean, you're not 40. What are you, 38? I'm older than you. And you've got an awful lot still to go. I mean, I know that you have been trying to get some momentum for a Dutch America's Cup campaign. And I'm sure that while, maybe not successful for the coming America's Cup, some momentum sort of moving maybe for the future. At the moment, what do you take with you from the last edition of the Ocean Race? What do you take with you? What do you say with pride? Everything that you've already mentioned about the team gelling together, but finishing so strongly in The Hague, second place, the record, what do you say? This I remember that, and it makes me smile.
The biggest thing is that we ended up again as a team, and nobody would have given me a dime in Alicante where they would have thought, let's see if this guy can get it all together. And but we ended up as a team in The Hague, and that was I think for everyone involved, and that was a very is a very big achievement and of the team. And I was very lucky enough to, as a skipper, and to lead that, and that's what I probably look back at the last race. That is very fulfilling, and it's, I always have to laugh about Luc Malloy, because if you look at really into the sport sort of effort you had, he always says, everyone forgets who won the race, but everyone always remembers the fastest. And that's sort of a slogan that we thought that was very good to hear for ourselves in 2005, 2006 race as well, when we crushed the 24-hour record at the time on the Volvo 70. And now we did that again on the Atlantic. So that's sort of... that was a very cool, special moment as well, especially when you do it with big numbers, and not like with half a mile. So that was pretty cool.
If I can absolutely understand that in 2-3 editions time, if nobody's broken that record, we'll still be talking about Simeon Tienpont's team AkzoNobel. Is anybody going to break it? So that has the potential to last for quite a while. Simeon, thank you very much for talking me through not only the last edition as well, but what kind of made you fall in love with all of this. And you're not that old, 38.
No, I don't feel old.
If you're old, then I'm old. But we will see you.
22.
We will see you. Go on, sorry.
I'm still doing the same stupid stuff when we were 22 years old, so not much has changed.
Oh, well, Simeon, thank you very much for talking us through everything. And it's fascinating to hear what motivates you. And I'm sure we're going to see you again in the race in the not too distant future.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good luck.
Well, a big thank you to Simeon for talking us through his career and giving us the story of Team AkzoNobel in the last edition, plus the inside on his many victories in sailing. Certainly a sailor that we're going to see a lot more of in the future. If you enjoyed this interview, subscribe to our channel. We've got some incredible guests lined up over the next few weeks. And let us know in the comments who we're forgetting about. Who is it that you want us to talk to? We'll see you then.